What's up, everybody? So today I'm going to discuss something that I have not talked about previously, and that is going to be my interest in Christian philosophy, specifically ancient and medieval Christian thinkers. Now, you may be wondering, oh, why do we need to study these people, or what could they possibly have to offer? Let me start by recounting a little bit of my interest in the medievals, specifically Thomas Aquinas, whom I mention quite often in my videos. So I first came to Thomas by the advice of my grandmother, who watched a video or something on Thomas Aquinas on TV, of all places. And I originally thought, oh, well, he's this medieval monk, he has nothing to offer. But I actually came across his name constantly in this literature regarding the Enlightenment. And I was trying to understand what the Enlightenment was and why exactly there was this big break in philosophy, and what the difference is between the scholastics, to whom Descartes and a lot of these early moderns were reacting against. What were they up to? And so I kept seeing Aquinas' name pop up, and I finally decided to look into him more, and I found out that he is extremely interesting. For instance, in my philosophy of mind course in undergrad, we were taught philosophy of mind starting with Descartes, and I never knew that Thomas Aquinas had a very, very large treatment of philosophy of mind in his work. And I was never taught a lot of other things, like this ancient approach that Thomas Aquinas is articulating to the problem of God, the problem of universals, all of these things, the problem of identity, all these things. I was never taught them, and I stumbled across them through this basically suggestion by my grandmother and this reading and coming across his name in the literature. And so everything kind of snowballed from there, and I decided to look into him more. Now that led me over the next few months to looking into his treatment of the existence of God. And I found out that the modern caricatures of his five ways and his proof in the De Ente and Essentia was just, it's pathetic, to say the least. It is just horrible. And I never understood that. I had read Thomas Aquinas' five ways in anthologies and in texts like Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, and in another book, Keith Ward, and another book by one of my professors. I had read about Thomas Aquinas' five ways, and they were just caricatures. They were not what Thomas was actually saying. And so the more I started to study this stuff, the more I found out that Thomas is widely misinterpreted and misrepresented in the contemporary university setting. And that just kind of made my interest in him snowball more. And then I had this big realization about a year ago that Thomas's treatment of God is radically, radically different. And so Thomas, and really the entire Christian tradition up until the 1900s, treated God as not a being, not a being, not a person, not some sort of cosmic superhero, not a thing, but being itself. And this is not something I'm going to go into in this video, but that was a huge realization for me, because I always thought of God in a very anthropomorphic way, as some sort of guy in the sky with unlimited power. And come to find out, not a single Christian thinker, literally not a single Christian thinker, if you can find one, please leave it in the comments below, because it would be this academic revelation, but not a single Christian thinker thought of God in that way up until the 1900s. Brian Davis at Fordham has done extensive work on this. You can look into his textbooks on philosophy of religion. He distinguishes between classical theism and neo-theism, or theistic personalism. Classical theism being the view of God not as a thing, but as being itself, as pure act, and neo-theism or theistic personalism being the view that God is basically a cosmic superhero or a person. And so this was a big revelation to me, and I really became interested in what these ancient Christian thinkers had to say regarding God, and it just snowballed, and I kept becoming more and more interested. And I came across a guy named Barry Miller, who's a modern, and another guy named Norris Clark, who are modern followers, modern Thomists, you could say, roughly. And they are going to say similar things. So if you want to check out more modern work on this topic, you can look into them. But for just real quick, Clark is going to say that you do a philosophical investigation, you come to some sort of ground level of reality, and that is what is called God. So that's kind of that God issue aside, really briefly there, why I'm interested in it. Now let's talk about another thing, and that's going to be how these Christian thinkers really lived out their lives. So I was listening to a YouTube video by Gregory Sadler about a year and a half ago, and something really, really stuck with me. He said that a lot of these ancient thinkers, so Aquinas, but even going back way further, so Clement of Alexandria, Justin Martyr, Origen, the anti-Nicene fathers, all of these people, they are nothing like modern Christians that you see today. They lived their entire lives for or in pursuit of the Logos. They lived their entire lives in pursuit of this divine wisdom. And they didn't want philosophy to be some sort of flashcard thing, or that you just go to school and you get the basics and you just memorize, or they didn't want it to be some sort of academic practice. No, they were interested in philosophy as a way of living. And this philosophy and theology that they studied, they studied Plato, they studied Aristotle. They were interested in living this out and incorporating it into the Christian faith, and vice versa. So you had people like, I think it's Valerius or something. I can put that in I can put his specific name in the description below. I forget how to pronounce it. But he was interested in incorporating Christianity into Neoplatonism. So he was a Neoplatonist who converted to Christianity. But then you had other people like Augustine who converted to Christianity and then incorporated Platonism into it. And he was just a great example. These two thinkers are great examples of the dialectic between Athens and Jerusalem. And so I'm really interested in this relationship of Neoplatonism, Christianity, Aristotelianism, Christianity, how they interact, but more importantly, how these thinkers lived out their philosophy. It wasn't a separate area of their life. They were embodying it in everything that they did. And so that to me has just been very, very interesting, very, very eye-opening. Now, the other thing that I have to mention is something that I discovered recently, and that is that these Christian thinkers were very, very serious intellectuals. And this should give everybody pause. So Augustine actually says that at first, when he read the Gospels, and this is in his Confessions, when he read the Gospels, he was not impressed by them. He thought that they were for low-level people, that he had Cicero and all these other thinkers like Plotinus, and they wrote at this much higher academic professional level. And why, according to Augustine, why would I never need the Gospels? But then as he started to study them more, he realized that there was profound insight into them. And this is very, very interesting, because Augustine actually had many competing philosophical systems in his day that he had to wrestle with. So famously Manichaeanism, he had to wrestle with that, and he actually deconverted from that and converted to Christianity. Now, let's take stock of this, kind of keep this in the back of our minds, and think about this, and think about it in the context of other Christian thinkers like Clement of Alexandria, Origen, Justin Martyr, Polycarp, all these people, Tertullian, whoever you want to name. These were all serious intellectuals like Augustine. And just like Augustine, they had the biblical texts, okay? But they also had competing philosophical systems. Now, I was under the impression that these thinkers just heard from testimony from people that knew the apostles, and they just said, oh, screw it, I'll convert to Christianity. But that hypothesis doesn't really hold up, because as serious intellectuals with alternative philosophical worldviews, these thinkers had to have thought that Christianity provided some sort of rival interpretation that was better than the alternative philosophies of their day. And this is the profound insight that has made me super interested in these early Christian thinkers. So let's take a concrete example here. Pick any of the thinkers that you want. They had to wrestle with Stoicism, Neoplatonism, Aristotelianism, Gnosticism, many other things, many other paradigms or worldviews, atheism, materialism. Yet, they thought that Christianity and the stories contained in the Gospels provided the best account of reality. Why is that? It's a very, very interesting question to ask. They must have thought somehow that the Gospels and the epistles, Pauline letters, they must have thought that those contained a philosophy embedded within them. It wasn't enough for them to hear on testimony that there was a guy named Jesus of Nazareth who purportedly rose from the dead, hearing that from the apostles or people who knew the apostles. It wasn't enough because these people were academics, they were scholars, they were thinkers, and they were aware of rival interpretations of reality. They must have thought that the biblical text, the New Testament and the Old Testament, contained within it the most powerful philosophy to be conceived of. And that is something worth thinking about and wrestling with. So it's a good place to end. It's a good place to think about. It's a good place to stop and reflect on that for a bit. But we should not close off our minds to thinkers just because they're old or ancient, especially when they were elite scholars of the sort that Origen and all of these thinkers were. We should instead reflect on their lives and try to get into their shoes to see what they were thinking. For instance, if you could take a government job and you could go be rich and famous in the city, why would you then go into the wilderness and study the monks and study Christianity and convert to Christianity like some of these church fathers did? It's something to think about. And it's something at least that should lead you to say that, well, there's something there. There's something in these people's thought that is of utmost importance, not only to them, but to us nowadays. Perhaps it's not true, but perhaps it's the greatest truth of all. Thanks for watching.